Broadcasting from Ireland, featuring interviews with some of the biggest names in magic. Welcome to the Deceive Reality Podcast with your hosts, David Peace and Steve Spade.
And we are live. Hi, everyone. Welcome back to the podcast. Thank you so much for joining us. And we are joined this week by the great Matt Johnson. Matt, how are you doing?
I'm very well, Dave and Steve. How are you guys?
We're doing
good. I'm in my car running late as always, so here I am.
Hey, I just learned everything I need to know about Steve. He's a professional, international performer, traveling the world. He's out on the road. He can't get where he needs to be on time. And on his headstone, it will say, I just needed another 5 minutes, right?
Exactly.
Or else his girlfriend was mad and he's not allowed in the apartment. One or the other.
He's actually probably sat in his driveway. That's right. He's like, I'm on the road, guys. I'm on the road. Sandwich comes through the window. Thanks for having me, guys. Great. Absolute pleasure. Yeah, totally, right?
So on the, we always start at the very beginning and the cliche question, how you got started in magic. But if you just want to give us like a quick overview of how you got started and where the obsession really began for you.
Well, I mean, to get there, really, you've got to go back to the fact that I was born and raised in the UK, in Sheffield, England, a little town called Rotherham outside Sheffield, actually near Manchester. And I lived there till I was 21 before I started traveling. And I started about 12 years old with the I've got it up here on the wall. I've got the entire set, the Paul Daniels card tricks. You remember the ones that came in the different colored pouches? I've got it right up here, the full set, the original one from the 70s. And that's how I got started, really, that and buying a couple of tricks from the market. And then what really kicked me off was my mom hired a magician for my brother and sister's birthday party when I was about 13, 14. And my sister stood up and said, my brother's a magician, which I wasn't. But he called me up after the show and he said, listen, there's a magic shop in Sheffield and you should go pay it a visit. And I went. It's still there to this day, Magic Enterprises in Sheffield. It's about to close down, actually. It's been bought out. They're going to knock it down. But I went there every Saturday, first one in at 9, last one out at 5, 52 weeks a year, all through my teen years. And that's really where I learned, not the performing side, but the craft, from the other old magicians. Like, even to this day, they all collect in that shop. Nobody buys. I don't know how he keeps it open. Nobody buys anything, right? They buy a deck of cards and some flash paper. They drink his tea and coffee, but it's the meeting place. And I learned from some great magicians. And that's kind of how I got started. Really, that's it in a nutshell.
Yeah, so I do think we're starting to lose that because the only in-person magic shop in Ireland closed a couple of years back, and it's it's that whole area. Like, how do they keep it open when people can buy everything?
It's such a shame, but unfortunately, it is the way of the world, right? I mean, it's the same as if you're buying clothes. Nobody buys from a store anymore. Everybody goes to Amazon. So it's the same with magic. People buy online. They don't go to brick and mortar shops. And those brick and mortar shops, the original ones where they've got a couch and a coffee table and, the fact is, like I said, nobody buys anything. So it's really difficult for the owner to keep it going. But that place, it's very special. And if anybody out there is watching this, well, I'm sure everybody's watching it. Like, if anybody's watching this crap, anybody watching this, if you really want to treat Magic Enterprises on Broad Street, 82 Broad Street, Sheffield, off the main roundabout, every Saturday is open to magicians and it's full of magicians. And it's the last building in its area that's not been knocked down and turned into corporate company buildings and stuff, and it is actually happening. It's been bought out. I'm not sure when the change is going to happen, but it's going to close down. So if you really want to feel that, and everybody's welcome there. And in fact, if you go in there, I'm sure there's a poster of me somewhere in there. Russell Hall runs it, and the guys are all great, and some of the original guys from back in the day are still there. Go see it before it disappears.
Definitely. So I think that is cool. Like, and if you're not into magic, avoid anywhere groups of magicians hang out, because magicians hanging out can get weird. So, and if we spot a layman, they're going to get hit with about 20 tricks before they're left.
Very weird, very quickly. Yeah,
exactly.
But it really is. I mean, I'm hoping that the COVID, being in Canada, I'm hoping I can fly there before it actually gets knocked down, because for me, it's like a part of my family dying. It really is. I mean, that was my home for a huge amount. The first job I ever had was helping in that magic shop behind the counter. I mean, it's a huge part of my history, and I wouldn't be here without it. So I really, really hope I can get back before it goes. But really, if anybody can get there, drive an hour or two and go visit it on a Saturday. It's always fun.
Yeah, the only brick and mortar shop in Ireland was in Limerick, in my hometown, and yeah, definitely, every bit of pocket money you ever had was spent in there. And the same kind of thing, though. People used to meet there all the time. He stayed open for 40 plus years, but it was like a miracle that he was able to.
What a shame, eh? What a shame. Who's the magician? I've forgotten his name now, but I think he's great. The magician from Ireland that's got the ponytail, slick back hair.
Pat Fallon.
Yes.
Oh, Pat Fallon. Pat.
Yeah. Whereabouts is he in Ireland?
So he's in Dublin.
Yeah. I remember when I was lucky enough to perform. Actually, where is it? Here, 2016. I performed and lectured at Blackpool, which was a dream for me, because obviously I used to get this first convention I ever went to back in the day when it was one day on a Sunday, right? And the dealers were in the Horseshoe, and I remember watching Pat Fallon back then as a kid, and then I remember performing in 2016 and Pat Fallon being on the same show, and I've always loved that guy. I just think he's slick, and he's got all these props, and he's a magician, right?
Yeah.
Love that guy.
Yeah.
Love that guy.
Yeah, he's like the classical style magician, but he's great stage presence and everything else. Yeah, I mean, we don't see Pat a lot, but some of the conventions and bits and pieces, he still pops up, and you'd see him there. It's great to see him always.
Yeah. From the old school,
yeah, because it's the style isn't really. Who knows how long it will still be around with all the everybody now is performing a lot more more street style and that sort of stuff. But it's just so good to see the classic. And when you were going around, you've changed your style a few times. We talked about it briefly earlier, but how is that always evolved? Is it something that just happens naturally, or do you feel yourself going, I'm stale, and actively look for something new?
It was kind of exactly that, really. I can tell you exactly the point, because it's not that long ago. I left school at 18 and I decided to become a magician. And it was easy then. You just put an ad in the Yellow Pages, right? And you became a magician. You started your own business. And I was always encouraged to do that because my parents were self-employed. So I started. And then about 21, I worked on North Sea ferries. And then I went from there to Japan. I was magician for Hilton Hotel in Nagoya, Japan for a couple of years. And then I moved to Canada in 1998. And in order to answer your question, really that whole time, and right up until about 5 or 6 years ago, I was kind of this squeaky clean, no tattoos, no beard, kind of, boy next door, comedy magician, and I did kids parties, close up, mentalism. We talked about this. And I did it all the time, man. I was super busy. And I just got to a point where I was like, I can't do this anymore. I said to my wife, I have no interest in packing my case 20 minutes before I leave the door, not even thinking about it, doing a robotic show and then coming home. I have no interest. I'm done. Yeah. And I didn't know what I was going to do. And so, I said to my wife, if it were up to me, I grow a beard, get tattoos, so I can't do kids' parties anymore. And I changed my image, and I would just, and it wasn't about escapes then. I really didn't, it wasn't even in my mind to do escapes. That's a whole different story, but it was in my mind to kind of change my style. And about that time, it's maybe more actually, it's probably 9-10 years ago, I started doing stuff for Penguin Magic. I started releasing tricks, and I started doing Matt Johnson Presents tricks for Penguin. And they kind of started to mold my style a little bit. And actually, it was Dan Harlan that I went and did a lecture there, and then we went to a pub, and he suggested shortening my name from Matthew Johnson to Matt Johnson. He said it just sounds cooler, so I did. And then that's kind of where it started to evolve. And then the beard came. I went on tour with a good friend of mine called Christopher Taylor, a mentalist, and we toured Europe for a month. And I said to Christopher, I'm going to try and grow a beard, right? Because I can't grow hair on my head. So I said, I'm going to try and grow a beard. And I did. And I grew it in that month. And then I've never shaved it off since. And that was probably about 6-7 years ago. And then it just kind of all evolved, really. It just kind of all evolved and until about 4 years ago when I really started working on the water escape, which again is a whole nother story. But yeah, and then that's when it all took off. And really, the big change happened when I did Britain's Got Talent in 2018, because I got seen for the first time as not only as an escape artist, but also as this image, this kind of entity that had evolved. And then that's when my career really took off, because before that I was doing local shows, and then after that it was all theaters, TV, cruise ships, The Illusionists, you know, and now it was a different entity. So that's just where it's been until COVID hit, really. That's kind of the evolution of it.
Yeah.
It's cool that, you know, you're saying you wanted a beard and you wanted the tattoos, but you wanted that, you know, and then when you were true to yourself, you kind of became the performer you were meant to be probably from the start, but you didn't really know, because I think we all have the idea that we should be a certain thing because such and such is a certain thing, you know, but if you're true to yourself, you kind of fall into that mode where you should be.
I couldn't agree more. It kind of crept up on me. Even though I said that, it kind of crept up on me because back in the early days, like I say, you would not have recognized me, right? And I was doing kids shows and wearing not stupid, that's the wrong word. I shouldn't say that because that kind of says to people that do wear clown outfits and stuff, it's stupid. It's not stupid.
Whimsical, I guess.
Yeah, I made a great living. In fact, hang on, I've got an old video cassette here. This is what I used to look like. Look at that. Nobody's seen this. Look at that. Right?
Slight change in look. A small
slight change. Yeah. So no, it's not stupid. It served me well for many years. But you know, there was one other turning point. Another good friend of mine that lives here in Vancouver called Vitaly Beckman, who's a great magician. He's been on Penn and Teller a couple of times. Been on one of the most creative magicians. In fact, if not the most creative magician I know. But he stays away from magicians. He just performs. But he said to me one day, this is 7-8 years ago. He's like, why are you, I've got a couple of tattoos, no beard. He said, why are you all cool when it's just you with your t-shirt and your caps? And then when you do shows, you dress in these outfits and you're loud and you put on a funny voice. And I said, because that's how I make a living. And he's like, yeah, but there's more to you than that. And that's kind of that, and Penguin and that's where it all kind of started to change. And although it crept up on me, you're absolutely right, Steve. I believe this is who I was meant to be all along. And I wish, in many ways, I'd have got there sooner. But because I'm 47 now and I didn't do BGT until I was 44. But at the same time, you know, I grew up watching people like Paul Daniels and Tommy Cooper. And what I learned from the way I was a performer before was, and what put me in good stead, is I built a really strong foundation of performing, right? Of being able to ad lib on stage, know comedy timing, stage craft, performing. All that came from 20, 30 years of doing gig after gig after gig after gig. So by the time I reached this kind of part of my life, I've got a very, very solid structure as a performer to kind of fall back on and as my foundation, which I don't think if I'd have done it the other way would have happened, you know.
Yeah, definitely. It's good to mix it up as well. Like, I think most magicians have done kids at some point, and they can be the hardest audience to perform for.
Oh,
like,
my God!
Kids, you can do anything.
Anybody will tell you who does escapes and danger stuff and all that. Forget it. You go to Billy's birthday party and have 26-year-olds. If you're coming out of there alive, you know. I mean, seriously. I mean, kids stuff is great, man, because you have to be a great performer to control the kids and to wrangle them and to get your point across and to keep the energy going and you learn to ad lib from being a kids entertainer, you know, because if you don't, you die. And so I would not change that for the world. Now, interestingly enough, I couldn't do it anymore. Not because I'm above it, not because I don't. It's just because that craft that I once knew, it's not. I just couldn't do it anymore. I'd be eaten alive, because what I do now is a different craft, and so I have huge respect because I spent the vast majority of my career doing that. And it paid the bills and paid the mortgage. So I have a lot of respect for it, but I've just moved on to a different thing now. So my mindset is a different mindset,
One of the questions we got brought in, I'll bring it up now because you touched on Britain's Got Talent, but the question from Daniel was, did you prefer being on Fool Us or Britain's Got Talent? Kind of like what the differences between doing those two shows was like.
Well, one thing I'll say right from the get-go is that there's not been a TV show that I haven't done that I haven't enjoyed, and that I haven't enjoyed the staff involved and the production teams. And I really believe that a big part of that and your experience is what you put into it and how easy you are to work with. And if you're on time and if you are, because when you're on a TV set, producers and runners and staff, they've all got their own agendas. They're busy. They're getting yelled at left, right, and center. They don't need you being a prima donna, right? So one of the things I pride myself on is whenever I do a TV show, people always on set come up and say, you're so easy to work with. And that's for anybody going into that line of work or trying it. That's the biggest plus, because if you're easy to work with and you're a nice guy or girl and you're memorable, then they're going to think about you more, right? And they're going to want to work with you. So I've always had great experiences. As an overall experience, I would have to say Britain's Got Talent, just because it was a longer experience. Penn and Teller was one day of filming, whereas Britain's Got Talent lasted a long time, and it really put me in the public eye, and it was kind of cool being this star for a while, and people recognizing me on the street. There's actually a really crazy story that I can tell you that encompasses both that a lot of people don't know. But I got on Britain's Got Talent not by being called or looked for. I did it the old-fashioned way. I sent video auditions through their website online. I did it for about 3 or 4 years. And for the first 2 years, I never got a response. On the third year, which was 2017, I had done the water tank for the first time, and I'd filmed it, and I sent that in, and they said yes. So in 2017, I paid my own money to ship, flights, hotel. It cost me about $6,000 to go. I got into the day of filming, and in the morning, you have to do a full rehearsal of your act. And in the morning, I did the full rehearsal, and about 2 minutes underwater, my water tank shattered. It exploded, and it flooded the set of Britain's Got Talent, shut production down, right? And I had to come home with no water tank. I was scared of being underwater. I was injured, and all my dreams of being on that show for years are gone, and $6,000 up in smoke. A month later, in 2017, I was supposed to be on Penn and Teller Fool Us. I didn't have a tank, and I also was terrified. So I came home. I was super depressed for about a week. I didn't get out of bed for a week. And then my wife said, "What are you going to do?" And I said, "You know what? I'm going to do it." And I got a tattoo, and I got this. That's where this tattoo came from, and that's where these words have always come from, which is this one here: "Never give up." That's the water coming out the tank. I've got the date that the tank exploded. Never give up, and I got that done that a week after. And then every day I brushed my teeth. I looked at it. And I ordered a new tank. I had a new tank built by a guy in Calgary called Richard Sherry, who's a builder. Cost me another $5,000. It was shipped to Vegas sight unseen, and when I got there, it was too small. I couldn't hold my breath in it for more than 30 seconds. It was way too small. And so we were on the loading dock of the Rio Hotel, and they were filming other acts. And they said, "What do you want to do?" And I said, "You know what? Wheel me out, put me in, lock the lid, and just leave me in there." And that's where that line came from that I said on BGT, "If I pass out and start floating, get me out." It actually came from that, because I said, if I pass out, get me out. Other than that, leave me in. And so I did Penn and Teller Fool Us the month after that accident happened, and it worked. And so I did about 1:50 seconds, I think it was. And then once I'd done it and got my confidence back and I got a new tank, I then started sending the video to BGT, and I didn't get a reply. I must have sent 20, 30 emails. Who wants to hire the guy that just flooded the set, for crying out loud? You got your shot, you messed it up. But I kept going, never give up, right? I kept going. And eventually they said, come back. And I went back in 2018. And then I got this tattoo, which was the date, the 4 yeses, the standing ovation, right? So by never giving up, I got what I set out to achieve. And it changed my life. It really legitimately changed my life. I mean, I got to the semifinals, as you know. But that opportunity and that learning that I could overcome something like that and get through it. I didn't have the money. I didn't have 11 grand just to throw away. And bearing in mind, when I went back the next year, I had to pay another 6 grand to ship all my stuff. It cost me about 17 grand all in all. I didn't have the money, but I made it happen. And by doing that, it taught me that nothing's impossible. And it sounds so cliche, but it is absolutely true. Yeah. And then it changed my life. And then it all changed. I got a cruise ship agent. I got in with the Illusionists and started touring. TV shows came, theater tours. It literally changed my life. And since then, I've had a lot of accidents, some really bad ones. But that's all I can say. I'm no better than anybody else. It's just about having that drive and that tenacity to not give up, to just, no matter what happens, if you want to do it, then do it and don't let anything stop you, because it's going to. It's absolutely going to. But you can either sit and feel sorry for yourself, or you can get back on the horse and do it again. So, yeah, that kind of the long-winded version of that story.
Good thing we got that question in, because that's a great story. So I think, a lot of people would have just gone, well, I had my shot, I gave up, that's it. It's just game over at this stage.
David, just very quickly, people out there, I'm no better than anybody else. I'm not this great thing. And I've been fortunate and I've been lucky, but also I've worked my ass off. And I've had so many doors shut in my face. I've had so many people, honestly, it sounds cliche, but so many people, including magicians, who I won't name, who said, oh, you're not going to do it. You're not good enough. You can't get there. You know, blah, 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 blah. I just took myself out of that toxic circle of things and just focused on myself. And I said, I'm going to do this. I'm going to do this. And no matter what comes in my way, and no matter how much money I got to figure out, I'm going to make it happen. And it's not easy, but it does. And so that's all I can say is, if you believe in yourself, then make it happen. Don't take no for an answer. Right.
Absolutely.
It's great moral to live by, that never give up attitude is great on any, especially as an escape artist as well, because there's times where it gets so difficult and hard. You're just like, the easiest thing would be to give up, but you got to persevere and keep going.
It's 3 words, and I have it all over now, and I try and tell everybody. It's funny because I have it tattooed, but I also had these wristbands made, never give up, and it says, you got this on that side. But, I can be hiking a mountain, or I can be trying to do 20 push-ups, and it's hard. And then I just think, you know what? Never give up. And it drives me on, because it's so important to remember those words, because it's so bloody easy. And even, this last year and a half, I've been sat at home, drinking too much beer, not exercising, feeling sorry for myself. But we all do it. But you have to really take it from within and say, you know what? If you do give up, you've only got yourself to blame. End of story.
I didn't even know 20 push-ups are possible. 20 push-ups.
Hey, I can do more now. I can do more now. I'm back on the saddle, man.
Especially after the last year we've all had. But one of the TV moments, I was rewatched it earlier, and it was what I thought was really funny as well, which is good to have with the comedy you're saying from the previous performance style, was when you're on the Late Show with James Corden, where you're pretending to still be in the box from the week before, and the atmosphere. How did that come about? And that whole
that wasn't I didn't write that. That wasn't my idea. What happened was, I was on a show that same year, 2018. I was invited to film a show called The World's Best, which was a brand new show in LA that was kind of like Britain's Got Talent, but the idea was, instead of the audience voting it, you did your act on stage, and then there was a wall of 50 judges. And actually, funnily enough, Barry and Stuart, the magicians.
Oh yeah.
So he was
Oh,
one of the 50. He was one of the 50 judges, funnily enough.
Nice.
And then in front of him there were Drew Barrymore, RuPaul, Faith Hill, and then the host was James Corden. And so the idea is you did your act, and then the wall of 50 judges got to vote 1 point each, so that's 50. And then the 3 judges at the front got to vote out of 50, so it was a total of 100. And then after you'd done your act, they all voted, and then there was a giant globe behind them, and it went and you saw it go up in number. And if you know, so it's called the world's best. So I made it from the top 50. There was only 50 acts, and I made it to the top 24, I think. And but anyway, the host was James Corden. So after I filmed it in 2018, it was due to air February 2019. And after I'd filmed the initial round, which was the water tank, my wife and I were in Mexico, and we got a call from James Corden's producer saying, "Can you come? We've got this idea. Can you come on the Late Late Show?" And I was like, "Yeah, big dream." And he's like, "We want the water tank." I said, "Well, we have a problem. I'm in Mexico. The flight case was in my garage, which is locked. The water tank was at my builder, which is about 20 minutes from here, but it was in pieces. We'd taken all the frame off. We were redoing the frame. And so I was in Mexico. And so again, never give up. So I spent a day on the phone. I got my dog walker, who had a key, to come and open my garage, my builder to drive up and get the flight case. He hot glued all the metal back on, put it in the flight case, and they came to his place and shipped it to LA. And I was there 5 days later.
Nice.
And you know, and we did that. And yeah, it was pretty funny. I mean, it was his idea, but I mean, the funny thing about that was he ad-libbed a lot, and I was underwater for a long time because I was underwater before they even rolled me out. Dude, I was freaking out. And when it was over, there was a live audience there. And when it was over, they opened the tank. I came up, and I won't tell you what I said to James Corden, but literally I looked at him and I went, "You know," and said a few expletives. And he looked at me and he laughed. He's like, "You're a professional. I knew you had it. But I was legitimately inside like, I can't. This is too long." You know, like it wasn't fun. So yeah, it was. But what a great experience! What a great experience! You know.
It's a great piece. It's a great piece. It's got that real kind of old school vaudeville kind of a feel. It's just great. Yeah.
Well, that's who I am as a performer. If you see me on cruise ships, I do mentalism, close up, comedy, ad lib, you know, illusions, and that's who I am as a performer. Very, very much like an old Paul Daniels or David Nixon. Or I'm just a vaudeville, you know, that kind of sensibility. I would much rather be a live performer and make less money than be a YouTube millionaire and make more money. I just have no interest. It's who I am. Yeah. It's what makes me tick, right? So,
yeah. What I liked with that performance as well is that a lot of times when magicians get on like a late show or any of those talk shows, it's just come on, do a trick. Very good, thanks so much, and they carry on with the show. And then they have like a celebrity on and they do a skits with the celebrities. Whereas like you came on and you didn't do any magic while you were there. It was kind of like took you away from just, oh, this is a guy who comes on, does a trick, we say thanks very much and gets out of here. It was just more of a different style.
I wish I could say I was responsible for that, because if they'd have said, "Will you come on the show?" I probably would have done a bunch of tricks.
Exactly.
But
that works too.
Yeah, I thought it was great. And you know, part of me was like, do I want to do this? Because the danger aspect of the thing. But you know, I think sometimes it's great to show a human side and a humble sensibility and have some fun, a different side to your character, right? It's really important. You don't always have to be this, you know, this stoic person or it all be about the emotion or whatever. It's nice to show different emotions. So I have fun with it. It was really fun.
Human. When you show a human side, a bit of sense of humor, people, that's how you get more fans, I think, is when they actually know, oh, that's a real person. It's not just this character.
100%, and that is the key. I am not the first guy to go underwater. I'm not the only guy to go on there. I'm not the guy who's been underwater the longest. But that is why, certainly the first water tank that I did on there, that is why it works so well, because people forget it's about the performance, but it's about the emotional connection with the audience. And when you're doing an escape, especially, my opinion is, and again, this is just my opinion, I'm not saying it's right, but when you're doing an escape, if you emotionally connect with the audience and make them feel that they're in there with you, and you are not some guy who can just do this on stage on his own without them there, they are an integral part of this experience, and they know that what you're doing would be hell on earth. If you can do that, then that's where the magic happens. It's not about getting underwater and holding your breath for 28 minutes. It's not about rolling out on stage, having all the lights and doing your act. Sure, it looks fine, but it's like, to me, it's like bubble gum. You know, if you can't emotionally connect with the audience, you're missing out on this really special thing that happens when the audience is like, they're your family. Or every one of those thousands of people is your family, and they're all rooting for you, and they don't want to see you die, right? That's the juice. And I'm not the best escape artist in the world. I'm not the best performer in the world. I'm really not. But everything I do now, when that change happened for me, part of what I learned is the thing that people remember is not the trick. It's not the escape. It's not the routine. People remember people, and people remember connections and emotional connections. And when you walk out on stage, if you are humble and you are true, and I mean true, not telling a story true. And I'm not saying there's anything wrong with that. But for me as a performer now, I have to be absolutely 100% true. So whether I'm doing an escape, or whether I'm doing a magic square, or whether I'm doing a levitation, if it doesn't fit my story, if it's not part of my actual life story, it doesn't go in my show. And you know what happens when you do that? When you come off stage afterwards and people come to you, they say, oh my God, I had a grandma that passed away that I love, or I went through this extreme, or, oh, never give up. I was in a bad place where, and you start to make those connections. And that's where the real magic happens. It's not about the tricks. Definitely. It's not about the stuff.
People can relate. Yeah, people can relate to it on a dimension. It's like when you're watching a movie, and if they don't give you enough time to kind of, realize what the characters are and build rapport with the character, if something happens to that character, the movie is a waste. It's just like, you don't care if something happens to that character, because there's no... You don't know. Yeah,
and I'm not saying there's not a place for it. I'm not saying that people who do illusions and do them to music is wrong. I'm not saying that people who do, I've got great friends from the illusionists who are manipulators. They're phenomenal, and it has its place. But if you are opening, to me, if you're opening your mouth and you're going to be sincere, it's like an action movie. You can watch an action movie, and it's a popcorn movie, and you watch it, and it's like, whoa, that was incredible. You feel amazed. But it's never going to pull your heartstrings or feel sincere. So there are certain performances like that too. And again, I'm not saying that's the only way to go, but for me, it's what works. And for me, when I did Britain's Got Talent, when I did the water tank, even when I look back at it now, again, I'm not saying it's the best thing in the world. I'm just saying it's the best that I can do. And you can tell that the audience and even the judges are sincerely into, and you can tell when I come out, the look on my face, that I'm sincerely not having a good time. Because I've not learned to hold my breath for 6 minutes. I can get to about 30, 45 seconds under there, and then I'm shunting air, and it's painful. But it adds that sense of realism that I was looking for. And so I think that is what my strength has become, being sincere. And there's a lot to be said for it,
No, it's a crucial component in escapes, because like if you come out as the superhero or the macho man that can just do it, then they're not gonna engage. But you have to make them feel like this can go wrong. This is not a trick. This is real. And you could be in this scenario, and what would you do? And they have to ask themselves that question.
And it's a fine line though, because you are absolutely right, Steve, but it is a fine balance, because, as we all know, every escape act that comes out is going to go, especially if you're on TV shows and they say, well, could this go wrong? Yes, it's really dangerous. It can go wrong. Now, most of the time that is true, but it starts to sound a bit cliche, right? But inherently the stuff that we do, especially if you're doing stuff, escapes aren't inherently dangerous, but if you're doing stuff with burning ropes and saw blades and underwater, I mean, these are dangerous things, and you're going to get hurt. So yeah, it's I don't know. It works for me. It doesn't work for everybody. But again, I don't think with water, it's not about how long you hold your breath. And I'm not knocking anybody who holds the breath longer, but it's not about that for me. It's about making the audience connect to what I'm doing. And that's why you can watch somebody who holds the breath longer and maybe the audience doesn't connect as much. And you can get me who holds his breath for 2 minutes, 10 seconds or 2 minutes, 30 seconds, which doesn't seem like a lot, but they're totally connected.
I always think with the water as well, it's like the opposite I see happen with the straitjacket. So many people do the straitjacket and get out in like super quick time. And then it's like, well, who cares? And then some people hold their breath for like so long. People are like, well, you can hold your breath for that long. So it wasn't that thing. But like, I think 2 minutes is not.
I'm not knocking it because there are some phenomenal performers who hold the breath for a long time. To me, an escape underwater is not about holding your breath a long time, because I think it's diminishing returns. You get to a point, let's say 2:30, 3 minutes, where the audience starts to go, hang on a minute. He can just hold his breath a long time. Now, when Houdini did it, he didn't hold his breath that long. But the appearance was, because he was covered by a cloth in the water tank, the appearance was that A, he was holding his breath, and B, when he appeared out of the tank, it appeared like that. It's a mystery. How did he get out? Not like, how did he get through all those walls and lock things? And it was a mystery. Now we've changed now. It's not a mystery anymore. Now it's got to be full in your face. I'm holding my breath underwater. That doesn't mean that we have to prove the point and hold our breath for a long time, because I think the audience, I think the emotion, they give up on you. They just go, he can hold his breath. It's cool. It's amazing. But I'm not invested, because now I trust this person, right?
Yeah.
And I think that for me, it works for other people, but for me, that is, I'm doing myself a disservice, because I'm losing that magical moment where the audience is like, oh my God, this guy's going to die. That's where it comes back to Houdini, who said, everybody wants to see me die, but nobody wants to be there when it happens, right? We all know that phrase. Yeah. Absolutely true, though. We go past the car crash. We don't want to look at it, but we have to, because it makes us feel a little bit better about ourselves, that we are safe and we're secure. But we want to watch the train wreck. And if you can make the train wreck look like and feel like and actually be, if you can make that escape be an upcoming train wreck, you can't look, right?
Yeah.
So that's for me how I like to do escapes.
I always look at it with lay people too. Like when you have a lay person watching, like my wife doesn't know much about magic, or some people in my family, and when they see someone at like the 4 or 5 minutes underwater, their thought is, well, it's a trick. They obviously have oxygen in there somewhere. Whereas like when you bust out of the box in Britain's Got Talent and you're clearly out of breath and in distress, well, you can't fake that look on someone's face. It's like that has to be real. Then I think
I'm not that good an actor. It genuinely, people always ask me, and it's so funny because I'm the guy, and I'm not saying do this because it's not the right, but I'm the guy that if I've got a gig and I've got to do the water tank, I will put off rehearsing, I'll put off holding my breath, and then I'll get there. I'll go out for lunch in the morning, I'll have in the afternoon, I'll have a beer, I'll have a hamburger, I'll put on a t-shirt because my belly's a bit big, and then my buddy will go, "Are you in shape for this?" I don't. Just leave me in there, man. I'll figure it out. And I'll get in and I will literally be dying for about a minute and a half. Now, I'm not saying that's clever. I'm not saying it's smart, but I do know that is what I'm going for, is the realness of it. And the fact that when I'm banging on the tank, they can tell that I'm out of breath. That's what I'm going for. Now, that might sound crazy, and that might sound not smart, but I know when I get to my total failure, if you like, I know then that I can shunt I've forgotten the word, and I use it all the time, but I know that I can then start to gulp, and it's going to hurt like anything. I might have to do it 40 times, but I know I can get through it. So I'll do that because it makes the escape more real. I don't want to be in there coasting and like, because it's going to look fake. So I don't, and that's why I've had some really, 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 really bad accidents,
Yeah.
But at the same time, it's calculated risk, because don't think for a second that I'm not smart, that I'm going to put myself in a position where I'm going to die, because I don't want to die. But I have to make my escapes believable. They have to be, to a certain extent, believable and dangerous to me, because that's what works for me, and I'm sincere about it. So
you don't want to die, but it has to be death defying. That's kind of that's the balance.
Yeah.
Why did you think of water as well when you were going to escapes? Was it always water, or did you try like fire or other elements?
Do you know this story? You'll hear, but the thing is, whenever I do these things, somebody will ask one question and then I'll go on for half an hour, and I get that from my mom. But so I'll try and make this as quick as possible. My brother suffers with a rare genetic disease called tuberous sclerosis, and it's not curable. He was born with it, and there are varying degrees. My brother's got calcium deposits in his brain, and what that means is it causes seizures, right? And when my brother has a seizure, he clamps his teeth down like anybody that has a seizure, and he doesn't breathe. And so I've watched him have 3 or 4 seizures in a row, and his lips go from pink to bright blue, and him literally go into a coma. I've watched this happen multiple times. About a year, in 2016 was when I started working on the water stuff. So about a year before that, 2015, I was in England visiting my family, and my brother had a massive seizure attack, and he ended up in hospital, right? And I came back to Canada, and I said, because I don't see it a lot, because don't forget, I've been away for half my life. So I came back to Canada, and I said to my wife, I can't believe that happened. I said, as his brother, I should be able to do something. I should be able to protect. And I said, at the very least, I should know what he's going through. So I started going to a swimming pool. I went at 6 o'clock in the morning when it opened. I went 3-4 times a week. I had no training. I didn't watch YouTube videos. I knew nothing about breath holding. I didn't have any escapes or water tanks. I just wanted to know what it felt like. And I started going, and the lifeguards watched me, and I weighed myself down with weights. I went 3-4 times a week, and I ended up getting myself up to about a 4.5 minute breath hold underwater in 6 months. And it was excruciatingly painful for that whole 6 months, because I should have got professional training, but I didn't. After 6 months, I said to my wife, this is fine, but I can let go of the weights and I can come to the surface. So I need to build a box. So I didn't know where you got escape boxes built. And I'd seen a guy on America's Got Talent, Spencer Horseman, do a tank where he had his hands through the top. And so I went and had a box built at a plastics company locally, because it was never supposed to be part of my show. Don't think for a second that I'm all about, that's too expensive, I'm going to go get it done myself. It was never supposed to be a part of my show. So we took it to my friends, and bearing in mind I could do 4.5 minutes, I got in it at his house, and I literally did 20 seconds and I freaked out, because he closed the lid, locked the lid. I freaked out. And that's when I realized that's what my brother goes through. He can't get out. He can't just get out when his breath's up. He's in it. And that's when I realized my journey's starting. And that's when, because anybody will tell you that does these things, you can hold anybody, a lot of people can hold the breath on a couch for 2 minutes and just relax. You put yourself underwater, it's more difficult. But then you put yourself in a locked box, psychologically, it's more difficult, and it burns oxygen faster. Now you start to move in that box, it burns oxygen even faster. You put yourself in front of 3,000 people and all these judges, it burns even faster. So I knew my journey had started. And so I spent another 6 months working on that. And then I had a theater show booked, and I said to my buddy, let's put it in the show. Let's try it live. And I think I was underwater for about a minute 20, a minute 30, and I videoed it. And that's what I sent to Britain's Got Talent. And that was the box that first went and exploded, because it was never built properly. It was built by a plastics company. So then I started looking around. I found Richard Sherry. I think I found Richard Sherry through a guy in England. Oh God, I feel bad about this because his name's right there, and I talk to him all the time, and I can't believe I can't remember his name now. Oh God, Danny Hunt, escape artist. Yeah. So I think I spoke to him and he put me on to Richard, I can't remember. And so then Richard, I found out, was the one that built Spencer Horseman's tank. So then Richard built my tank because it was actually on his website for sale. It wasn't like a copy or something. So Richard built my tank. And then that was it. And then Richard built the thing I did in the semifinals on Britain's Got Talent, the box with the metal straitjacket and all that. Richard built that. And that was it. And that's why I started doing underwater. And when I did Britain's Got Talent, I did that in the first round. I then wanted to do some mentalism, a close-up piece, an emotional piece about my grandma. But once I'd done that, that was it. I was the escape guy. You're doing escapes. And so it wasn't really what I wanted to do, but I also was smart enough to be able to see the reaction from the people, what they loved. And so that's what I did. And so then we built the head box, which is a whole nother story, because that thing was absolutely mentally nuts. That I should never have. The way Richard builds it has a release valve on it for the water. Mine doesn't. I insisted. That thing was death on wheels. And I should never, ever, ever have built it the way I did. Because on Britain's Got Talent, it took me 220 to get out. And I can't even describe how much harder that is than the water tank. Because it's chokehold on your neck. You can't get any breath in. Then it's filled with water. You're standing. It is absolute death on wheels. And that's not the way that Richard sells it. And I should never have done it. I did it on 2 TV shows, and then ultimately the 3rd TV show that I went to try and do is where I had my accident and I drowned and I hung myself in that, and ended up in emergency. And I've never performed it since. Yeah. So,
that's where the real danger comes into it, when you are doing it like more legitimately, where you go to your limit, and that's it. Anything that goes wrong, then most time. In like a card trick, you always get a second chance to find their card. You don't get a second chance to get a good breath hold or something.
No. And that thing, when I had the accident, I knew I was going to die. I knew. I got to a point where my music was so long that the idea was, when I escaped, stop the music. And the music ended. I had trouble picking one of the locks, and I went way beyond it. And then by the time I gave the signal, I just eyes rolled up and I passed out. And if you've seen it on Britain's Got Talent, you know it hangs from chains. So I hung myself and I passed out underwater. And then they got me down. I had like a minute seizure on stage, which is ultimately why I started, because my brother has seizures. And it was horrendous. Yeah, I mean, I literally was in there and I remember thinking to myself, this is it, you're going to die. And I made peace with it, and there's nothing I could do. Next thing I knew, I woke up on a stretcher. So
did that just affect you for that one, or did you find any of the other water stuff difficult to do after that again? Just in that,
the water tank, absolutely. I'm still scared of it, because once an accident, and then since then I've been in COVID for a year and a half. So once you've it's already hard enough being underwater as it is psychologically, even with all the safety in the world. Once you've been in an accident like that, where you have reached your limit, I can't describe it to anybody. And I hope it never happens to anybody. And it's not because I was careless or I'm irresponsible, or, I put a lot of work into doing that, because I knew I had to be in tip-top shape for that. It was just one of those things that happened, it is, until you've been there, you can't describe what it's like. So
you have to bring back the cool balloon guy. So after this, and just
nobody ever died from twisting a pink poodle, right?
Yeah, that could have been your semi-final performance. You do the water tank in the audition, get to the semi-final, balloon models, and that's going to blow people away.
Literally
underwater balloon modeling.
Underwater balloon. You're not the first person that suggested that, actually. Underwater balloon twisting.
Just make shackles out of balloons and then just pop them.
Right. I can't get out of these. Have you ever seen a balloon when it's popped? It's almost impossible to get off.
Yeah.
Exactly.
So speaking of some of the stories that you've had, we have the segment The Good, the Bad and the Ugly, which is about a performance goes wrong. And we've got a couple of them. But you've anyone that went wrong in a way that you just like look back on now and just find hilarious, but at the time wasn't so much?
Escapes.
Or just any trick that you've done?
I mean, a couple of things. When I first started out in my career doing kids parties, I was dressed as a clown, and I remember doing an act in England, and I got my mic on a stand, and a kid came forward and pulled my pants down, trousers, I should say, not pants, trousers down around my ankles. That was a funny one at the time. I've pulled a fish hook through my tongue. We just lost Steve. I've pulled a fish hook through my tongue. You know the Eric Ross's hook. Well, I do it with a big 2-inch fish hook, and I actually use a different method which I created, and the first time I did it didn't work, and it pulled the fish hook through my tongue. So that wasn't pleasant. I've burnt myself. I've skinned elbows and arms doing escapes. Obviously, the thing I just told you about the thing. I mean, I've had a lot of stuff go wrong, man. But again, you just keep moving forwards, right? You don't let it define you. So
absolutely. Stuff always goes wrong, because one thing I like with this segment is like a lot of young magicians feel like, oh, I messed up a trick, I'm not that good, especially if you do it at like a big performance or something. And like, I don't think I've ever done a full show without one thing going wrong.
Oh God, no! Even to this day, I spend a lot of my time doing cruise ships. I walk out on stage and I'll have 5 or 6 things go wrong in the show. The difference is you can't sweat it. Don't forget, the audience doesn't know the ending until it gets there. Now, if you're doing comedy magic, which I kind of still do a little bit of on the ships, it gives you a little bit more leeway. Obviously, if you're doing a dove act and you go for a dove and it's not there, or you go to vanish a candle and it ends up on the floor or whatever, those things it's hard to cover. But even those things, you either just don't sweat it, pick up the candle and move on with the rest of your act, or you let it put you off. And the only difference is, after doing it for years and years and years and years and years and being in every situation you can, is you just learn to not sweat it. Comedy can be your best friend, right? Unless like an escape where if it goes wrong, you could possibly die. That's a different story. But the other stuff, you drop a deck of cards, or you're doing back palming and you drop them, then just back palm again and do it again, or whatever. Don't sweat that stuff, because it's really, the other thing to remember is, it's interesting, I'm sure this has happened to you. If something goes wrong and you kind of play it off, the audience will come up afterwards and you might say, because you're feeling conscious about it, oh, it was a great show, except for that one bit where I did this. And then the audience will go, oh, I thought that was part of the show.
100%.
Because to them, it is part of the show, because all they want to feel is that you've got it. You've got it under control. So they don't have to worry about it, right? The second you start worrying about it on stage, the audience feels uncomfortable. So just make sure you've got it under control. And if something goes wrong, play it off. Have fun with it. Do it again, or make it part of your act or whatever. Don't ever sweat that stuff, because it's not, I know that's easy to say when you're kind of getting started and you do worry about that stuff. But the more you can learn to not sweat that stuff, the better your performances will be, even when stuff goes wrong.
Even on the last show I did before, like the lockdowns with COVID and stuff, I was trying to do a matching routine with questions. It's a Luke Tremay effect. And the person was like, it messed up the last one. They didn't have a match. So I was like, oh, they ended up saying something that was mean. So I was like, oh, well, that was a bit cruel. I thought you were a nicer person, because I said they wouldn't do something. They said they would do it. And I was like, oh, because you were so mean, you're going to have to do something to make it up. And I want you to make a wish for someone, which was going to be my second effect with a different spectator. And I just rolled them into each other. Right. And everybody thought it was part of the show that I got it wrong.
Exactly.
And I was like,
exactly, Dave. And that is so much what it's about. It's hard sometimes to do that in the moment, but the more you practice and the more you perform, the more that will become second nature. And then actually you start to look for the times it goes, and then you start to make things go wrong on purpose, because it was a funnier joke or it was a better laugh, right? So
it's what you want then in it. Because I think that's the thing is, I sometimes leave out my magician in trouble effects, because I know I'll probably stumble into one at some point during the
That's
show.
a good one.
So I'll just stick with that. One of the questions we got sent in actually just before we get up to the hour to finish up was from James, what is your favorite release you've ever done? Because you were talking about working with Penguin and stuff like that. Is there any of your releases, or is this like asking you for a favorite child?
No. I've put out a lot of stuff over the years, and a lot of people don't know that about me. That I spent a lot of time creating, lecturing, performing at conventions. I've got a big frame up here where I've got all these little images of things I've worked on or released. There's been a few. I think if you look on Penguin, like Melt is still like the #1 selling trick on the homepage. It's been there for 10 years. I mean, that just from a perspective of the fact that it's done so well.
Yeah.
My favorite releases overall recently have been a couple of things I did with Murphy's. I did a thing called The Journey, which was my take on any card at any number, just because that was like literally a 5-year journey for me. And I also released a thing called, and this is not a plug for my stuff, but I released a thing called In Plain Sight, which is the Magic Square. And only because that is the version that I use for everything. Oh, there's Steve. How are you, Steve?
My battery went. Apologies, guys.
Hey, no worries. In Plain Sight, just because that is legitimately the Magic Square method that I use for stage, parlor, close-up. I use it on stage, on cruise ships, in every show, and I use that method. And it's really a worker method. It's simple. It works. I'm proud of that. So those two releases, certainly. And another great point in my career that a lot of people don't realize is I was actually on the True Astonishments project with Paul Harris. A lot of people don't know that. I did a thing on there called Tubular with two bills that melt together, and I got to work with Paul Harris on that, and so that was cool. I mean, there's been so many. I'm looking up here of things, releases that I'm proud of. I think the biggest thing I'm proud of is that everything that I've ever released, I've always used, and I know that gets banded around a lot, but I really legitimately have. So I don't ever feel like anything I've ever released has just been about money, because I've never made a lot of money out of releasing products.
How do you know when the product is ready for release? When you've been you've been performing for a while, when do you know that it's ready, and also that like it's worth actually?
It's never ready. It's never ready, because when I released Melt, I worked on that for years, believe it or not, and then when I released it a couple of months later, I came up with another version, Melt 2, which is now on when you download it, you get Melt 2 as well. But I came up with that after. Something's never finished. It just has to be at a point where you feel that it should never feel like you're ripping off an audience, or it's just tacked together so you can make some money. That's not the way I do it. It's not the way I wouldn't want to buy. So when I feel it's worthy of people, then I'll put it out. And the main reason I put it out is not for money. It's to just kind of stamp my name on it, just for magic history. Oh yeah, Melt, Matt Johnson. You know, it's not the greatest trick in the world. It's not the greatest method, but people like it. And when you say Melt, people say Card Through Bill, people say Matt Johnson. So that's what it's about for me. It's not about money. It's about stamping something, so that I can move on to something else and feel like I left something. You know.
Do you ever find that something that I've talked about, a few creators who release stuff now under like pseudonyms or fake names, just for like Google, if they Google your name, someone trying to book you, that they don't see all your methods? Did you ever think about releasing stuff under a different name, or were you always just like, choose my name away?
Yeah, no. Funnily enough, I'm not going to tell you, but a lot of people don't know this, but Matt Johnson's not my real name.
Yeah.
Matt is, but Johnson isn't. A lot of people don't know that. A very small handful of people know that. I've used Matthew Johnson since I was 14 years old, so for like 30 odd years. But no, I've always put stuff out. I have nothing to hide, or I'm not worried about people Googling me. Or if anything, you know, it's like if you're a public speaker, they always say have a book that you've written. If anything, it adds legitimacy to you at your craft, I think. You know, so if people Google my name and they came up with like, oh, he's sold these tricks and that, oh, he creates stuff, even regular people, it adds legitimacy, I think, to what I do. So, I've never been worried about that. Yeah,
I think it's good to just, because I do think it definitely adds legitimacy. So we're just coming up in the hour there. I'd like to thank you for joining us. We really appreciate it. And do you have anything you want to plug or tell people where to follow you or anything like that?
No. I can't say anything yet, but I will say watch out for me soon, hopefully. I'm just looking forward, like everybody else, to getting back to working and traveling. And so anytime I get to talk shop with people like you is always an absolute pleasure. And I can't believe an hour's flown by. I talk too much.
It flies by when it's going well. And I thoroughly enjoyed it. And we definitely get you back on again when you can talk about what you can talk about.
Oh, anytime.
Absolutely. And you can follow us at Deceive Reality and there's deceivereality.com got some Murphy's Magic products up there. So definitely check that out. And
one last thing. If anybody does want to follow me or wants to know what I'm up to, on Facebook, it's 3 words, like Matt Johnson. On Instagram, like Matt Johnson. Twitter, the same. If you want to check, I always post every day, and that way you can kind of follow what I'm up to and what I'm doing and stuff. That's Absolutely. The best way.
Definitely recommend people do that. And thanks, everyone. We'll be back again, I think, next week. And we'll talk to you all then. And we'll see you later. Bye.